Parker Morning Gang. Let's go back here. Today's objectives are you're going to watch a video. I'm just going to talk about some of the things that I'm discussing here today. I'd like you to read the book on pages 140 to 141. And then we're going to kind of set up for a little activity towards tomorrow into Thursday. Hopefully we had a good weekend. Thank you so much for those of you that came out on Friday. My family and I was overwhelmed. I was in the backyard doing some work in the garden and was trying to stay busy. My wife's like, come up front, sit in this chair. I'm like, what are we doing here? 70 some cars, just so overwhelming. Thank you so much for your gifts and your signs and everything. You guys are just amazing. You really are. So keep up the good work. Keep working at home, and try not to drive your parents or your siblings crazy. So last week I asked you to take a look at the map of the French and Indian War and complete it, color it, submit it. If you didn't do that, you need to do that, please. Now, maps are important anytime we're talking about history because obviously we want to look at the area we're discussing before we can move into talking about that area. Red is British, right, all through here. This is the New England colony. This is Hudson Bay, controlled by the Hudson Bay Company or Rupert's Land. Blue is New France, all the way down into what is the United States today. Yellow is cool down here. We can't really see it, but the Spanish do occupy most of Florida and obviously down here into Mexico at this time. The contested areas, which are these hash marks, are areas that are essentially the French are claiming and the British are claiming down here into western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, all the way through Indiana and so forth. Now, what we're looking at here is the maps with forts. Now, the forts along the river are very, very important. And we're going to talk about why forts are important and why putting them on rivers are important. But really what it comes down to is the beginning stages of the French and Indian War are based upon these contested areas, like here in the Ohio River Valley. What is it about these areas? It all comes down to conflicting economic interest, where people are arguing over an area, or people are debating over something. Maybe it's a situation where they're around a campfire and there's two native groups that don't get along, but their European allies are with them, and a small skirmish breaks out, which is a fight. And maybe one person is really seriously injured or wounded or possibly killed in that fight, and then they go back and they tell their small communities about it, and their small communities have what is a local government, essentially. And that local government maybe organizes a resistance to go fight and get back, or to defend the honor of the individuals that were harmed in that little melee. And then local government then in turn petitions to large government, and large government then weighs out the options, and they eventually reach out to the royal government back in Europe, and then the European governments then say, hey, what is it worth for us to get involved in conflicts like this with another European nation somewhere far away? So eventually that's exactly what happened here in North America. And eventually it led to the French Indian War in 1753. This is really when the conflict begins. So in your book, you're going to read about, in 1753, how Virginia is disputing claims. They're disputing claims here at the time between the French and the English. Now, this area is essentially all native, but the French don't have many people living in New France. Just like you read in Building Forts in Their Heart, the French are doing a fantastic job of making relationships, and they're building friendships with the local native population. The British, on the other hand, have a lot more people living in New England. People are pushing further and further westward, trying to find farmland, and that's creating major conflict with them. So what's happening now is that the Virginia governor at the time is saying, like, hey, look, we need to get out into this area. We need to start to establish ourselves in this region, and we need to build some forts out here to defend our region and our territory, and we need to defend this against the French, essentially. So at the time, what happens is they have a young, budding man by the name of George Washington. I don't know why I can't turn the slide. Trying to do so right now. There we go. And George Washington himself, he is sent, he's a 21-year-old man, he's sent to defend and create a fort along this region, the Ohio River Valley. This white outline itself is the actual watershed of the Ohio River Valley. So everything within the watershed here, I think Mrs. Kane talked to you guys about it, flows down into the Ohio River itself. And then the Ohio River flows into this river, Mississippi. So this is West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky, and Tennessee, and it goes all the way down. So this is an extremely important river, considering the fact also that up here are the Great Lakes. Now, the Great Lakes are a way that are connected to the St. Lawrence River. And the St. Lawrence River is eventually connected to the Atlantic Ocean. So goods and supplies and things can be traveled and carried inward into the continent through this area. It's important. Here is young George Washington. Now, we don't see the gray curly hair, powdered wig, and or wooden teeth and stories of chopping down a cherry tree. What we see is a young man who is wearing a military uniform. He's 21. What he's wearing in here is a Virginia militia uniform. A militia is something completely different from a standard army. It's kind of like the reserves or the National Guard that we have today. Militia is literally made up of men that live in the area that make up the region that they're the colony they're a part of, and they're asked to defend their colony. The Virginia militia itself wore this particular uniform, and Washington is someone who wants to make himself known to the royal government of England that he is somebody who's willing to do whatever it takes to become a British officer. It's kind of ironic to think about this guy who eventually led our country to earn its independence against the British government or the royal English government. But he eventually in the beginning stages, he wanted to be a British officer because that was something of prominence. It was something that showed the world that he was somebody who was valuable. He had a lot of characteristics that were commendable, and he obviously was trying to live towards that. Now, he was asked by the Virginia governor to build a fort in western PA region. Now, it was not Pennsylvania at the time. This particular area essentially wasn't claimed yet, but he knew of an area through local scouts, native scouts, and he was a surveyor, so he kind of understood the land. He knew how the rivers flowed and the watersheds worked, and he knew there was one particular region that was very important, and that region was this spot here, what is today known as Pittsburgh. Now, this here is the Allegheny River. Now, I would show you on Google Earth, but for some reason I tried to do this earlier and I clicked out and I think it stopped recording. This is the Monongahela River here. These two rivers, this one flows from the south going north, this one flows from the north going south. They meet to form the Ohio River. Now, the Ohio River is a larger river. Obviously, these two rivers come together. If you've ever been to Pittsburgh, you know Three Rivers Stadium. Well, that's why they call it Three Rivers Stadium, because of this spot here. Now, when Washington arrives, he sees this fort. This is Fort Duquesne. He unfortunately is there. He arrives too late, and the French have already been there. The French have built this fort. This is a absolutely big fort. It's a formidable fort. Now, this fort itself is huge. It's got ramparts on it. It's got these bastions, these large walls, which have cannons on them as well. These are direct fire cannons, and direct fire cannons are cannons that shoot essentially in a straight line as far as they can go. Now, the direct fire cannon is important because they put their fort right here in these particular rivers. Now, why did they put forts on? Let's not go there yet. Why did they put forts on the rivers? Well, sorry, I'm drinking coffee. If you put a fort on a river, you're essentially putting a big cannon, or lots of big cannons, firepower on highways. Let's go back to this. If there are goods coming from the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence River, any supplies, soldiers even, if they're coming down the river, right, the Allegheny, they're coming this way. Or if you have goods coming out of Virginia, and they're coming down the Monongahela this way, they're on boats. Any particular fort that is on a river, especially in a junction like this that can control the northern flow of goods and southern flow of goods, is extremely important because those forts can control the traffic. It's essentially like rivers in the 18th century were like highways of today. They basically had highways where any goods and people and traffic. If we had 18-wheelers going up and down the road today, which we do, and 18-wheelers right now, especially in this crisis, are controlling everything. They're making our country run. They've always made our country run. It's very important for us to keep 18-wheelers on the road. If we can't get goods from one place to the next, then this country can't function. Now, it's the same thing that's happening in these colonies. If the goods are controlled on the rivers by forts, then whoever controls that particular fort then can control a complete supply and resupply of anything that is downriver. So it's important for the French and the English to gain control of these spots. So it's like putting a cannon on a highway, and every time a car comes down, if you don't want that car to cross that highway, then you can just blow that car right off the face of the earth there. It's essentially why they did this. So Fort Duquesne is built there, and Fort Duquesne is a big fort, and the British are upset about this. Now, Washington, being the man who makes his way out to this region, and he doesn't want to be someone who fails in the eyes of the British government, he makes his way south, and he does what he was asked. He was asked to build a fort. This is the fort that he builds. Good old Fort Necessity. Now, if you go to Google Earth, you can actually see Fort Necessity. Go to Google Earth, type in Fort Necessity in the little search taskbar, and there is a park there today still. I don't know, maybe some of you have been there before. I've never been. I want to go. Maybe we can make when all this is over, maybe we can do like a field trip of some kind. I don't know. It's a good thought process, but who knows. Anyway, here's Fort Necessity. Does this look like Fort Duquesne? Not at all. But it's Washington's attempt to do something to stake British claim in this area. Now, Washington and his British claim eventually, unfortunately, does cause conflict. And just like I said before, between the two disputed areas, and that particular conflict will spill over into Washington making a name for himself throughout the world. And how he does so is, unfortunately, in kind of an error, to be honest. The error that takes place is an error that was it was Washington doing his best to control a situation, but the situation got out of hand because he trusted a particular local population or his native population, and I think they took advantage of him. And he eventually got duped by the French into signing something that he probably shouldn't have. So anyway, that's short and sweet. We're going to kind of continue. Hopefully this is easy for you to follow along with. I like doing this because it seems like I'm in the classroom again talking to you guys. So give me your feedback too. If you don't think, I'll put a little discussion board. If you think there's some things I could do differently with these PowerPoints and these screencast-o-matics, let me know too, so I can help you stay on track. But remember, if you have any questions, please let me know. Tomorrow we'll pick up with looking at something known as the Albany Congress and what takes place here at Fort Necessity. Have a good day.